All right, I've saved focus for last because it's the most important item to get right in camera. Exposure we can change later. White balance we can change later. Focus we cannot. We can't fix it in post. It's not one of those fix it in post type items. So it's really important to get it right. And we're gonna have to talk about some external tools or tools that you can put into the camera to help you, because one of the things you're gonna you love this camera is you're gonna have a love-hate relationship with it, because you're gonna love it because up to just a few years ago, especially at this price range, you just couldn't do what you can do with this camera. You can get some super cinematic, super shallow depth of field. It's really exciting stuff. It's awesome. But the thing you're gonna hate about it is just that when you're shooting at like f1.4 or wide open on your lens, it's going to be really hard to achieve focus, especially on a moving subject. And I'm going to give you lots of tips along the way. We're going to show some tools on how to get the best focus. So let's get into it. All right, coming from a stills background, you're probably familiar that once you take a shot, you can zoom right in. So I took an image right here, and let's just cursor over to the doll's eyes. And sure enough, the closest eye is in focus. We're got one thing kind of going against us is we've turned the sharpness in the camera all the way down. So it makes our life a little bit more difficult. So unfortunately with video, we can't do that. So let's say we shot this video clip and then we go to the one frame that we want to check the focus in, and then you try to zoom in. Well, you can't. That would be an awesome tool if we'd be able to do that, but we can't. But what we can do is when we're in before we hit record, we can go ahead and zoom in 5 or 10x to see if we're in focus. And sure enough, right here, we can see I'm shooting this at 1.8, so it's razor thin. And right there, our closest eye is in focus. So we've got the tools to do it beforehand. We just can't do it after the fact. All right, before we get too deep into the focus, I want to talk about two different lens types because I don't want you to hurt one of your lenses if you've got a certain type of lens. So this lens is the Tamron 24-70. When you have the switch turned to autofocus mode, this is what's commonly referred to as full-time manual focus. So I can use quick focus in video mode or regular autofocus in stills mode, take a picture, whatever I want to do, and then I can grab this focus ring and I could fine tune from there if I like to. So it doesn't matter if it's on manual or autofocus, you can always turn this, which is great because you don't have to be constantly switching the switch between manual and autofocus. It's just one less thing that you have to worry about. Well, there's another type of lens like this Canon 5D 1.8. It's a great lens, only about 120 bucks. Works fantastic for what it costs. It's an incredible lens, where this thing's like $1,300. So this lens is not full-time manual focus. So what do I mean by that? Well, right now I have it in the manual focus mode, and I can rotate the ring back and forth, and you can see that. Yes. Now when I flip the switch to autofocus mode and I try to move it, I can't. It's basically locked off, and you don't want to like try to work against that motor. So real quick, with these type of lenses, you can always manually focus, but these type of lenses you can't. And the ones that have that kind of resistance to them, don't try to fight against it, or you might ruin your lens. One other lens I want to talk about is, and a camera I want to talk about is the Stm Lenses. It stands for stepping motor. They're really quiet and they work really well with like the T5i, the 700D, or even the new 70, which I haven't tried yet. So the stepping motor is really quiet, but when it works, when you couple it with like the 70D, which has a feature that this camera does not have, I just want to talk about it briefly, is that it gives you the capability to accurately track somebody in the scene, which is amazing. And again, I haven't tried it for all the tests I've seen online. It looks pretty amazing. But basically what it can do, you can lock onto somebody's face, and as they're walking around the scene, it can constantly, without hunting, it constantly keeps that person in focus, and even at incredibly low f-stop numbers like f2.8. So I just want to mention that we don't have that in this camera. We've got some other features, but I just want to mention the Stm lenses. You can use them on this camera, but it won't be fully utilized without some of the other features. So I just wanted to mention that. All right, we got basically two types of focus, manual and autofocus. We're going to cover manual first. It's actually the easiest concept to get. It's not the easiest thing to do, but it's the easiest concept. So we're going to cover this first. So switch your lens over to the manual focus, unless you've got a full-time manual focus lens where you can keep it on auto. And what I've got here is three different objects. I've got this doll. Let's go. We've got this gray card in the background, and in the foreground we've got this blower. So we're going to focus between all three objects. And actually the doll's got two really things to focus on, and that's our two eyes basically. So let's go ahead and we'll get to the closest side. What I've found, like doing interviews, if you are going to shoot at f2.8, and I've done this in the past, and the person is at an angle to the camera, so one eye is farther away, even at 2.8, this is 1.8 we're shooting at right now, always focus on the closest eye. It just looks better if you're daring enough to do it at f2.8. And then here we are focusing on the far eye. What these modern day lenses, not the older lenses, but the modern day lenses, unfortunately, they don't have much of a rotation for manual focus. What I mean by that is the modern day lenses are designed for fast autofocus, so they don't want it to travel very far. They want it to go boom, lock in, really fast. So they don't want that focus ring to have to travel as much. But on the video side of things, when we're trying to do manual stuff, it would be nice if it had a lot more travel. Unfortunately, it doesn't. I mean, you can buy lenses that are just designed for cinema or video, and they'll have a larger throw, which will make your life a lot easier if you're doing lots of manual focus. So we have devices that we can get, external devices, like here's something very cheap where you could, set the focus right at the top and then go find your other focus, and then when you need to go follow focus back to the original object, boom, you've got it right at the top of the camera. Another trick that I do if I don't have this on the camera is I just use my finger. So basically I'll put my finger on the top of the camera, or right at the top, and I'll focus on the other item, and I know when I go back, I'll focus right to the top of the camera again. It's not the most accurate. More accurate would be if you got a follow focus attachment. I usually go pretty light, so I haven't purchased one of those yet. I'd like to try one at some point, but I can't give you any real experience because I've never owned one. But you can basically, what I've seen is you can do marks. So I could have 3 marks on a wheel on the side with a dry erase marker, and you could mark each one, and then you could go between each 3 quite accurately. And that's pretty much what Hollywood uses from what I understand. But for me, what I've been doing lately is, especially with this new monitor, I've been using another item, and that's called Focus Assist, and I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that next. All right, this is the iCan VK7i. I've got it listed on my gear page. Again, it's really affordable and for what it does. If I have these programmed, if I hit the F2 button, you'll see that it turns to more of a monochrome image, and we've got some red highlights going on around the blower. Watch if I pull it out of focus just a little bit, you'll see all that red go away on the blower. So this is a great tool for getting focus while you're recording, because like I said before, while you're recording you can't zoom in and look. So what I do is go to the doll next and see how well I can do this. And that's our closest eye right there. We can see that's all red. And this is the farthest eye. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see how well I did. This is where I think the closest eye should be. So I'm going to take the white box. Let's see how well I did. And put it right over here. And let's go in 5x and 10x. And then let's move this. Yeah, I would say I nailed it. I had it perfect. Excellent. And then as another test, we're going to go and see how well I can do this little target on the 18% gray card. So here we go. And again, this is what we'd be doing for real if it was recording right now, because again, we couldn't punch in while recording. So this one's kind of tricky because we can see a lot of red going on around the black, but we're not seeing much red happening on that high contrast area, which is a little bit unfortunate. So I'm going to have to guess at where that has the most, right there to me, that has the most contrast. So let's go ahead and zoom in and see how I did. And I'd say I was close, really close, but I'd say that is more right on. So I was extremely close because I think I was actually focusing on the nearest object, which is the black border around it, which might be slightly, I mean, like a fraction of an inch different than that. So, but that's actually not too bad. So again, if I go to the blower, let's see how I did here, because this looks like it's totally red. And sure enough, yeah, that looks, yeah, it looks in focus. So that's pretty much it for manual focus. There's not much to it. Using this type of tool definitely helps a ton. And I just got this monitor recently, and I've been getting a lot more practice with it. But as you can see, it's a very powerful tool, because if you're trying to do this without, let's go ahead and try it. So I'm going to hit F2 button, and now I've got no focus peaking. So let's go and try to get her eye in focus, their closest eye. And I think that's it. Now, again, I'm kind of cheating because I'm not looking at the back of the display on the 5D Mark III, where on such a small screen, everything looks in focus. You might think, oh, I got it, it's perfect. So let's see how I did here without focus peaking. And you can see I'm off. So let's go ahead and sharpen that up a little bit, and right there. So let's try it again, and let's go to here. This is our next test, is I'm gonna do this without focus peaking and get that target. This should be a lot easier because this one is a very high contrast situation. And to me, my eye looks perfect there. So let's go punch in, and I didn't hit it. It's right there. So as you can tell, this is a very powerful tool to definitely use, is focus peaking. All right, next up, we're gonna talk about the 3 different types of autofocus modes we have. So to follow along, put your lens on autofocus mode, and then hit the AF drive button at the top. And then you'll see this menu. And with the main dial, you can control which mode of the 3 that you want to be in. The first one is autofocus live, so live mode. The next one over is autofocus face detect, and you can see that little L is the nose of the face. And then the last one is autofocus quick. That's the one we're going to be using the most. So we're going to demonstrate the first one, which is AF live. So to get out of that, you can just hit the set button. And then what we're going to do is place this white rectangular box over the digital calibration, or that target area of the gray card. And we're going to press the shutter halfway down. And when I do, I'm going to say I'm pressing now. And listen for the amount of time it takes for it to focus on it. Ready, now. So maybe you thought, well, that wasn't too long, but in the scheme of things, that did take quite a bit of time. So now let's move it over to the blower, and let's see if it can do it. It thought it got it, but it actually didn't. So I guess there's not enough contrast between the wall and the red blower. Let's try the girl's face. All right, so there you go. And let's go ahead and check to see how they did on the face. And this type of focusing will always take the nearest object. So it's probably the tip of her nose is probably the nearest object, and it actually coincides with that one eye pretty well. So it actually did a very good job. But it's very slow. So let's go on to the next one. So I'll hit the AF drive button again, and let's cursor over using the main dial and press the set button. For now, it says, hey, I know there's a face in there, which is pretty cool. And you're thinking, this might be pretty cool because I could focus and it could do the work for me. But yeah, let's demonstrate. So I'm going to press the shutter halfway down. Actually, this is not a very fair comparison because it's already focused on it. So what I'm going to do is defocus it. I'm going to put it to manual. I'm going to defocus it, and I'm going to put it back to autofocus. And make sure that we're still on that same setting, which is face detect. And right off the bat, it doesn't even know there's a face in the scene because it's so far out of focus. So what I'm going to do is press the shutter halfway down and see if it'll find it. It's looking for a face in the scene. It didn't find it. So it just kind of gave up. So if we kind of help it out a little bit here, I'm going to manually focus to her face a little bit more here. Put it back onto autofocus, and boom, it found it. So Doesn't work all the time. It only works if it's already pretty darn close to begin with. So if we go ahead and press the shutter halfway down, and it locked on, and let's go check to see how well it did. Well, you can't. This is one of the bad things about face detect mode, is you can't zoom in for confirmation that it actually got it, whereas the other one you can. So the last drive mode is, let's go ahead and hit the AF drive button again, cursor over using our main dial, hit the set button. Now this is quick focus. So if we press the shutter halfway down, we can see the white box, but the white box really isn't doing anything for us here. It's where the focus point is set. So we're going to put the white box off to the upper right hand corner. So what I'm going to do now, on the back of the camera next to the star button, is that button just to the right of the star button. We're going to press that, and it brings up this manual selection. So now there's at the very top, there's an M and FN button, if you remember, right next to the main dial. So if you press that one back so we can get back into the screen, and then press the MFN button, and then we can cursor through all the different types. So the first type is the Spot AF, and this is the this one and this one are pretty much identical, the 1 point, but the Spot is even closer. From the manual says it's like super tiny area, whereas the other one is the main 1 point autofocus. And then we've got expanded AF, and we can actually use the multi-controller and move this around if we like, to find out which one it's actually going to focus on. I don't use this. Then if we go to the next one, it gets even bigger. Again, I don't use this either. You might for photography, but for video I don't. And then you can get into this manual select the zone AF, and then the last one is like all 61 points. And let me go ahead and just demonstrate what the 61 points does. So it should pick the closest thing, which it is the blower, but let's see if it'll do it. And it didn't. Let's press the shutter halfway down again. You can see that area, the blower is actually not in that 61 point area. So if I move the camera a little bit to the right, let's see if it'll pick it up. And it still didn't. It's for some reason it's just picking the face. So I don't use that either. So let's go back here and then hit the M button at the top. And I'm going to use this one, 1 point AF. And this is what I typically use. And then we can cursor around to where we want to put the, and you can see we've got two of them, one on each eye. So let's try that. Actually, let's defocus first, and we're going to go to the target first. So I'm going to go down here and then hit set, and then press the shutter halfway down, and boom. See how, if you listened, it was really fast. So let's do that again for the girl's eye. So we're going to pick this button, and then we're going to cursor over to her eye. Let's move the camera slightly so it's right over her eye, and I'm going to press the shutter right now. Boom. See how fast that was? Extremely fast. So now let's go ahead and do the blower. So I'm going to hit the autofocus selection button again, and we're going to bring this all the way over and down, and then we're going to have to shift the camera ever so slightly. Now remember, the other one just couldn't do this, but ready, boom, locked on. So this is the most accurate, the fastest way to do it. It's great. And let me give you an example of how this works really well. Let's say you don't have a viewfinder, you don't have a monitor like I do, and you're out in the field, and let's say the sun is behind you, and this has happened to me many times, and let's say there's snow on the ground, which is in Colorado happens. And it's a bright sunny day. There's no way you can see the back of that screen accurately. I mean, you might make out some shapes, but it's totally like the sun's hitting it. You just can't see it, especially in a snowy situation. So where quick focus really comes into play is if you kind of see a blob of a shape of a person, let's say off in the distance 20 feet or so, and you want to lock on to focus. Well, in that case, you press the shutter halfway down using quick focus, and you know what I usually do is I leave this point in the center right here. So I'll leave that right in the center, and then I'll just move the camera around until I find that person, and boom, lock on. And usually in those situations when it's that bright and I'm not using an ND filter, pretty much everything's going to be in focus anyway, because it's going to be like a f/22 at ISO 100. But in those situations where you are using an ND filter, and let's say you're shooting at 3.5 or maybe even 5.6 and you want to lock on, this is a great way to do it. It's quick focus, just get it a blob of a shape, because like I said, you're not going to be able to see the screen in those situations when the sun is just beating down on it. Quick focus is definitely the way to go. All right, so I want to give you some advice on using a Glidecam. I don't own any sort of shoulder rig at this point, so these items that I'm going to give you probably will work on a shoulder rig, but they definitely work on a Glidecam device in terms of focus. Because you might be thinking, well, how am I going to focus if I've got my camera balanced on my Glidecam device? This is actually a Blackbird. What if I've got my camera mount on here and I want to, can I just reach and refocus? Well, you can't, because anytime you touch even lightly on this thing, it's going to move, and it defeats the whole purpose of having a gimbal type device. So my two pieces of advice of when you're doing that is, one, try to shoot and really light it really well if you're inside. If you're outside, it's great because you can shoot it like f16 or f22, which is awesome. You got a really high f-stop number. Pretty much everything's going to be in focus if you remember from the aperture chapter. Then my second piece of advice is shoot really wide. So let's say you're not in ideal lighting situations, you can't shoot it like f16. Well, if you're shooting really wide angle lenses will typically be pretty much all in focus past maybe 6-8 feet, depending on the lens. I mean, if you put a 16mm lens on this camera, pretty much everything past maybe 6 feet is all going to be in focus, which is awesome. So if you're inside and you can bump up your ISO and get your f-stop as high as you can, and you're shooting really wide, pretty much everything's going to be in focus. If you're trying to shoot at like f1.8 on a device like this, well, good luck. It's not going to happen unless you've got some very talented operator who is doing it remotely and you've got a whole bunch of expensive equipment that's wirelessly and he's actually doing the focusing for you. But those are my two guidelines. One, shoot at a high f-stop number like f16, and then shoot really wide. All right, that's pretty much it for focus. The best thing I can tell you guys is to try to do it manually if you can, or use quick focus like I've demonstrated. And when you're doing it manually and you're shooting at like 1.8 or 2.8 on your lens, it's just going to take some practice. I have two girls that are very young and they move around very rapidly. And I've gotten better over the years at shooting like at 3.5 or 2.8 and trying to follow them around, and then doing it manually, but trying not to do the hunting. You've all seen it, and you've all probably experienced where you go too far, and then you have to come back, and then you finally match the focus. So the best thing I can do is just recommend is get out there. If you got a couple of kids, try to follow them at 2.8, and after a while you'll get better and you'll learn, because unfortunately with different lenses, usually Canon will keep it very consistent, but going from some third-party lenses to Canon lenses, unfortunately, the barrel goes different directions. So how it focuses is opposite, which is kind of frustrating. But it's just going to take you some practice, and after a while you'll definitely get better at it. And also adding some additional tools like focus peaking, within camera with Magic Lantern, or using an external device like this monitor is definitely a great way to go. All right, if my audio sounds different because I'm using my webcam, just for a second here while we boot this up. So this is the EOS Utility, and after you've installed it, go ahead and double click on it. And if your camera is on, this one will light up. This is the third one, which is the one you want to actually start using. So let's go ahead and click on that. And then up here on the upper right hand corner, you're going to see one of the windows appear. And what you can do at the very top here is you can hit this wrench. And this is what we talked about earlier. Instead of typing it in a very difficult way, you can actually just use your keyboard and type your owner's name and the copyright information, and there it does it a lot faster. There's a bunch of other tools here. You can actually use this as interpolometer, I can never say that, the remote timer, so you can do time lapses, which is very cool. There's a whole bunch of other things, but that's not really what we're here to do. We're here to get this one right here, live view shoot. So if I click on that one, you'll see me come up. And what I'm going to do now is I've got to go to the camera and turn it to manual mode, live view mode, because right now it's set up photography, and that was the only way I could get this to go to the wrench menu, so I could change that. So let me go change that real quick. Okay, now we've got the good microphone, so the audio should sound a lot better. So I'll kind of give you a tour around what's going on here. Is, we're recording, and you can see the levels right here. And so what I'm going to do is show you as much as I can while it's recording, and then I'm going to turn it off, and then we're going to step through kind of how I set up when I'm using EOS Utility. So starting up here, there's custom white balance we're going to show you here in a second, and the meters we'll show you in a second. And there's pretty much nothing else that I can really show you. So unfortunately, we're going to have to go back to the bad audio. So now what you'll notice when I hit stop, I get all 61 points here on the screen. So pretty much what I do here is I will take this target, hold it up to where I think I'm going to be talking, pick one of the squares like this one right here, and I just double click. And then you can see it focused right on that piece right here. And then what I'll do too is up here, this eyedropper tool, I will basically click on there, and that will custom white balance. Since I've already done it before, it's working just fine. So then I'll unclick that, and then I'll look down here at the histogram, and you can see there's the white spike, there's the gray, which is a little too bright, and here's the black with a bunch of other stuff, probably the speaker and a bunch of other things that are in the frame. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to take this from ISO 400 down slightly, because I would rather be a little bit on the safer side than over to the right a little bit. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I got my exposure, I got my focus, I can monitor the audio in terms of the meters, and just about everything. I got the white balance, so it's a great tool. So let's go ahead and hit record again. So now that I'm recording, all that kind of stuff goes away, so we can't demonstrate it, but EOS Utility is a great tool for doing stuff like this, where you're just talking to the camera and you have no operator.